I've not been posting lately as I was off on a haul for a while. While on that drive, something happened to me. Something awful. I can hardly close my eyes anymore without worrying something from my past will come back to get me. What happened to me on that most recent haul has darkened my past even more. While my mind tries to repress these things, it also tries to convince me that they are not over, and whoever has troubled me is coming back. I was taking my cargo through the mountains, no service on my phone, no reception on the radio, just the sound of nothing. It had been like that for miles, just me, my truck, and the road ahead. It was very refreshing, exactly what I needed after the trauma of my past years. I noticed the time and sped up. I wanted to be out of the mountains before dark, but at this rate, it wasn't looking likely. Some time had passed and I needed to piss. I pulled over and got out. As I was finishing up, I noticed something in the distance. This was the first time I saw it. A creature resembling a man, a large man. I was about to call out when I realized that something was wrong with his face. I slowly came to the realization that it wasn't a man at all. The shocking thing was, it wasn't any animal I had seen before either. We stared at each other for what seemed like forever. The silence was finally broken by the loud cracking of twigs as this thing charged straight at me. I sprinted back to the truck and got in. I immediately shoved the keys into the ignition. My peaceful trance had been snapped. I slammed down the accelerator, something I had to do way too much these days. As I began to roll off, I saw the thing burst from the tree line and onto the road behind me. I was picking up speed, but so was the creature. I was at almost 15 miles per hour when I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the thing standing in the road, staring after me with a snarl on its face. If it was a face at all. This thing must have been a seriously deformed man. It had a human's body, but the stance of a wolf on its hind legs. Its face much too big for a person. The eyes were not aligned, and the mouth had retreated far up its face. I shook my head and drove on. Another thing for my mind to repress, and another thing to make my therapist tell me I'm crazy. I had covered a lot of ground and had almost made it out of the mountain range. Dusk had fallen hard onto the horizon, and I had almost forgotten about what I'd seen. My radio began to crackle, meaning I was picking up reception, and it looked like my phone had some signal as well. I was relieved, and in the first time in ages, I smiled. That smile was ripped off my face as I looked out my window. Up on a rock to the side of me was the clear silhouette of the man, its head turned and fixed on my truck. My heart sank down into my gut and continued its descent as I saw the thing jump off the rock and charge down the hillside towards me. How the hell had it made it this far? There was no possible way for that man to have gotten there on foot. My confusion ceased when I noticed how close it was to me. I sped up, building speed way too slowly. The man was close now, almost able to grab onto the side of the rig. I noticed a corner up ahead. In the wing mirror, I saw him about to jump onto the back. I turned the corner very sharply. That thing had missed its opportunity and bounded off into the hills. I drove on for miles. The darkness had settled now. I realized that my radio had stopped crackling and my phone lost its signal. I was sure I was meant to be out of the mountains by now. I stopped, looked at my map, and immediately knew I had taken the wrong turn. I had followed the signpost and had taken the sign that pointed to the main road. I thought back and recalled that the sign had been pretty wonky and it looked like it had been turned upside down. I realized how much of a fool I had been. Obviously it was the wrong road, as the sign would have pointed the other way. In all my fear, I wasn't thinking clearly. Looking at the map, there was nowhere to turn around for miles. With a heavy sigh, I drove on. As I set off, I could have sworn I saw something in the trees. Along the road, I kept noticing something walking behind the tree line, but I only saw it every couple of miles. I didn't even want to think about what it was. After what seemed like the longest drive of my life, I had reached the turning point and began to swing the truck around. Once I was facing the right direction, I let out a whimper. It was standing in the road in front of me. I got a better look at him this time. It was a man. He was tall and very wide. His face, like I had noticed earlier, was extremely disformed. He began to walk at me very fast. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't wait there and I couldn't reverse. I locked my door and drove forward, hoping to scare him off. For a brief moment, I thought I did. He began to walk around the side. I then heard him climbing up the passenger side. I locked the doors. In the same second, I heard the heart-wrenching tug on the handle. A split second later, and that thing would have been inside. I swore and drove off. The man was pounding on the window now, extremely hard. This was the single most terrifying moment of my life. I don't know what I was thinking, but I wound down the window a small amount. The man instantly stuck his fingers through. I then wound the window up quickly. He screamed and pulled them out, falling onto the side of the road. I carried on driving, not looking back once. I made it onto the main road, turned the radio up to full, and almost cried when I saw other cars. My phone had signal and I called my boss, telling him what had happened. He didn't believe me, of course, and told me to take the next few days off, and that he'd book me an appointment with the therapist in the morning. I felt so safe back on the busy road, and was the happiest I had ever been to see traffic in my life. I lay in my bed that night, running things over in my head. As I looked out my window, I was almost sure I could see something watching me. Surprisingly, I went straight to sleep, and I didn't wake up for 16 hours. I would never drive a mountain route again.